Okay, so it's 6. We will start. So first of all, good evening everyone. Welcome back to your own channel Scholars. And I am hoping everybody had a good weekend and therefore a good Monday, right? So we're back to discuss chapter 2, Bhakti Sufi traditions, and this is the second class we're going to have on that particular chapter. But yeah, before diving deep, let's just have a relaxing 5 minutes, right? Okay, a couple of y'all are already here. Hello, Ayush. Looks like you're too excited for today's class. Okay, so your school is taking offline exams and practicals. Should I go? Honestly, what practicals are you going to have for history, Ayush? Like, I don't really see a point of having practicals for history. I mean, if the offline exams are based on the CBSE ka sample paper model, like as in the MCQ format, section A, section B, section D, C, D, and then map pointing, like if it's exactly the same model, then that will be like a practice test, right? So I would advise like go and attempt it. That's just gonna help you in some way, right? But if it's descriptive and all, I don't think it's that useful. Oh, Viva. Cool. If it's based on MCQs and then the whole of syllabus is being covered, like all the 6 chapters, right? Then I highly advise you go and attend because nevertheless, it's just going to be like another Menti quiz, right? Like Menti quiz, you're doing it on online, but your school is going to conduct it offline. So it's going to be the same, like another quiz, right? So yeah, just go attend it. Cool. So yeah, so welcome back once again. Good evening to whoever joined right now. So we'll quickly do the introductions and the pitch, right? And then we'll quickly dive into talking about the early traditions of Bhakti, right? So, as most of you all know, my name is Nikitha and I'm the history educator here at Unacademy Scholars channel, and I am taking classes for both standard 11th and 12th, right? Since it's a Monday, it's a class for 12th. And also, if you all haven't joined the Scholars Telegram channel as of yet, you can go. The description is the link is in the description below. You can go check it out and join the Telegram channel. Basically the advantage is you'll get updates or information about what is actually happening on the YouTube Scholars channel, right? So that's like a comprehensive view. So go join it if you haven't joined already. And especially for 12 standard kids, there's a new Unacademy test slash scholarship test going on, which is called as Emerge. So this Emerge are basically whatever questions are being asked, like even the pattern being followed is aligned with the latest CBSE guidelines, right? So that will basically be like a practice for your term 1 boards, right? So in this week or like next week, it's happening from 25th to 28th for standard 12. So again, the link for that is in the description below. Go check it out and enroll yourself. And to just spend a few minutes talking about Unacademy plus and iconic features, the features vary largely. So first thing is you can actually sit at your own houses and listen to some of the top educators live classes, and they are all available on a single platform, like easy access to all the subjects. And there are also regular doubt solving sessions, answer writing sessions, along with practice tests and live test series. There's also exhaustive coverage of syllabus, so like every theme or subsection mentioned as a part of your CBSE board ka syllabus, they will be covered by the educators at Unacademy Plus. There's mentorship given to you, there's guidance given to you, along with access to study materials in the form of PDFs, which you can later refer to for any queries or doubts. So these are a couple of benefits of Unacademy Plus. And as far as the pricing is concerned, as you can see on the screen, there are a range of subscriptions To be very specific, there are 6, right? One is a 3-month, one is a 9-month, the next is a 12-month, next is 15, 18 and 24 months. The prices for the respective categories are mentioned beside the duration. So have a quick look at them and subscribe to whichever one you want, which is feasible. But I highly recommend to go for the longest duration, because in that rate you will save yourself a couple of bucks. And when you quickly move to Iconic, here the features are even better and greater. So like there's personal mentorship given to you, there are live doubt solving sessions, again there are weekly reports, parent connect and also study planners. So even the pricing for this Iconic might slightly differ when compared to Plus, but the durations are the same. So they are up on the screen, have a look at them and go forward with whichever one you want to, right? Yeah, so lastly, before going into the actual topic, I just want to say that there are some special classes, like special content available on the Unacademy learning app. So you can unlock them by using a specific code, and you can use my code for that, which is TUM10, right? So the procedure is basically you have to download the Unacademy learning app from Google Play Store and then log into the app and select your goal. So like your goal for now is 12 standard history and other subjects you're learning, right? So just click on your goal, and then on the top left corner in the menu button, there's an option called special. Click on that and it'll ask you for an invitation code. Use that code and then you can access the free special content, right? So again, the special content is interesting because it's more organized and systematic, right? So that will make your job easier in terms of preparation for the boards. So I highly recommend doing that. And yeah, so that was the pitch. We will quickly jump into today's topic, which is theme 2 in your textbook, which is called as Poems of Prayer, Early Traditions of Bhakti, right? So we'll be talking about various forms of Bhakti coming up after the 6th century CE, right? Yeah, so we'll start off, and just reminding y'all, if y'all have any questions or queries, just put them down in the chat box. I'm very happy to answer them, right? Okay, so we were talking about poet saints, right, in the last class. So like these poet saints were basically like eventually, as the time passed by, they themselves emerged as leaders, right? Like they gained such prominence, like they were such important figures that people often looked up to them in order to reach God, right? So that was the importance or the major role played by poet saints within the society, and they emerged as leaders. And then they had a group of followers, like obviously those followers are called as devotees, right? So usually if a particular person is following a god like Shiva or Brahman or Vishnu, we call him or her a devotee, right? But the fact that we are calling a person who follows the poet saints as also a devotee, now you understand what the role played by poet saint is, right? So almost he is looked at as a god equivalent figure. You getting the point, right? I'm basically talking about the importance of poet saints and the significance attributed to them, right? So this was gradually happening, like as the centuries passed by, like almost towards the end of 9th and 10th centuries, this form of emerging of leaders came up. And yeah, so I mean, like to be very honest, Brahmanas still remained important intermediaries, like just like the Vedic times, just like the Mahajanapada times, or even to the 6th century BC. We have talked about how Brahmanas were like the mediators, right? Or like middlemen or intermediaries between common people and gods. We've talked about this in last class, right? Last chapter. So like in order to reach God, like they had to go, like common people had to take the help of Brahmanas and reach God via Brahmanas, right? So this was the point we've discussed earlier. This is still prevalent, right? this form or this notion is still prevalent even in the Bhakti Sufi era. But one major difference here is back then in those times, women and also people from the lower caste, which are basically Shudras, untouchables, and all these people, they were never considered as potential people who could read Vedas or who could read Upanishads, right? They were always kept away from the religious social spectrum. But now that is not the case, because even women and also people from lower castes, they are acknowledged by the society, right? If not equal rights, at least the Brahmins acknowledge that okay, fine, women and lower castes are also like basic humans. They have the right to worship God. They have the they are eligible for liberation, right? Like liberation basically here is salvation or moksha. So they basically recognize that okay, fine, you can do it on your own. At least that sort of freedom or that sort of acknowledgement was given to lower caste people and women, which was not there earlier before the 6th century CE, right? Yeah. I'm hoping this point is clear. Like that was one basic difference which differentiated Bhakti era from the pre-Bhakti era, right? Okay, so very broadly speaking, right? Just don't take it on a literal level, but like on a very broad general scale. Historians, when studying about this Bhakti era, they have categorized or like classified Bhakti traditions into two broad categories, right? Even within these two, like within these two broad categories as well, there are subcategories which we won't be dealing with in this chapter. But for now, just remember that there are two broad categories according to the historians. This kind of classification existed or not during the actual 6th century CE, we don't know, right? Whether people classified themselves, distinguished themselves from the other group or not, we really don't know about that. But at least to make the study of it easier, historians have classified this. Getting the point, guys? Yes. So before dealing with what those two broad categories are, let me just answer Ayush's question why Brahmanas were intermediaries, right? Very simple point. All these Vedas and all were okay, Vedas were majorly considered as the primary books or the ultimate books which you can read so that you will have the knowledge to attain salvation. In order to attain salvation, you need specific things, you need certain knowledge, right? So you will get that knowledge from Vedas slash Upanishads, and only Brahmanas were allowed to read them. Not just allowed, like even other people could not read because they do not know Sanskrit. Only Brahmins knew that classical Sanskrit, right? So you're getting the point, like the relation between literacy, the relation between accessibility to Vedas, like all these factors played a role as to why Brahmanas were intermediaries. Got the point, Ayush? Or should I break it down even simpler? I am hoping that answers your question partly. Just put it down in the chat box if you need an elaborate explanation. Otherwise, we can move forward. Yes, in a sense, yes, you're right, because they are the source of information, right? Like even if a Vaishya or like a Kshatriya want to attain salvation or moksha, he needs to go to the Brahmana because he doesn't know what to do in order to attain salvation. That knowledge or information is given by Brahmanas because they only read Vedas, right? Yeah, you're right, Ayush. Cool. So now we'll move on to the two broad categories. So one is Saguna and the other is Nirguna. Again, these are Sanskrit terms, right? And to break them down into our language, Saguna in very simple terms is form or like a shape, right? A physical structure. But on the other hand, the complete opposite of it is Nirguna, which is formless or shapeless, or which do not have a physical structure, but rather it's a very abstract thing, right? So we look into what these specificities are. So when it comes to Saguna, right? Saguna is with attributes, having a form, having a physical feature. So the traditions who usually worshipped deities such as Shiva, Vishnu, or even Vishnu's avatars, and also forms of goddesses of Devi, like people who ever worshipped all these gods like Shiva, Vishnu, and Devi, they were basically following Saguna tradition, right? Like there's a physical form that was given to Shiva, there's a physical form that was given to Vishnu. In reality, Shiva and Vishnu might or might not have a form, they might have a human form, or they might have some other form. We don't know how they actually looked like. But it is a human creation, right? The physical form given to Shiva and Vishnu are human creations. So they just installed all these statues or like other sculptures at random places throughout the different parts of the Indian subcontinent within the temples, right? So they gave the lords or the deities a human form. So often conceptualized into anthropomorphic forms. This term is very, very important, which is anthropomorphic. Anthropomorphic basically means a human like, right? If you can't remember that big technical word, just remember human like, right? So all these gods have a human physical form. But on the other side, there is another form of worship called Nirguna, which do not have a form. And to quickly think of one example of the Nirguna form of worship, we can go back to Hinayana Buddhists, right? Like Hinayana Buddhists basically believe that there should be no statue which is existing, right? We only should have philosophies, we only should have principles, and everything should be in an abstract form. Nothing should take a physical form, or nothing should be material, right? So that's like the complete opposite of Saguna. You getting the difference, guys? Again, really, really important when it comes to examination point of view. So I've stressed on it enough, but if you all did not understand, just ask again. Yes, Ayush, you're right. Anthropomorphic is nothing but human-like, and uh, sculpture of Vishnu in any physical form, right? Like in any physical form. Okay, I wouldn't say any physical form. Let's take for example Shiva, right? Like sometimes a linga or like a Shaivite linga is also attributed to Shiva. That is not anthropomorphic form because linga is not in the form of a human, right? But if you find like a Shiva structure like in the form of a human with a head, with two hands, two legs, and all that stuff, then it can be called a anthropomorphic form, right? Got the difference, Ayush? Cool. Okay, Shrestha, Ria, Shiba, all of you all joined right now. Good evening. So just keep continuing, listen to the lecture, right? Okay. So yeah, after establishing what these two broad categories are, we will move on to specifically talk about two particular characters or two particular sects of Bhakti movements called as Alvars and Nayanars of Tamil Nadu, right? We will talk about who Alvars and Nayanars are, but remember that this kind of tradition only persisted in the state of Tamil Nadu, like the then Tamil land, right? So these Bhakti movements were happening right in the 6th century BCE, right? Uh, two major Bhakti movements were led by Alvars and Nayanars. So who were Alvars? Alvars were basically these saints who were immersed in the devotion to Vishnu, right? Just remember, Alvars, followers of Vishnu. On the other side, Nayanars, devotees or followers of Shiva, right? Just blindly remember that. If you all want to by heart it, by heart, do whatever. But remember that Alvars is Vishnu, Nayanars is Shiva, right? Yes. So after establishing that particular point, let's also understand that they traveled from place to place within the Tamil land, right? And their major source of worshipping, or their primary form to showcase their bhakti, is through singing hymns, right? So, interesting point, these hymns are not from Vedas or somewhere. In fact, these were the hymns written by themselves. Like they themselves composed these hymns, and they traveled from one place to another singing these hymns in the praise of their respective gods, right? Nayanars sang them in praise of Shiva, and Alvars sang them in praise of Vishnu, right? So while they were traveling within the Tamil land itself, this Tamil land is very particular because they've never crossed the Tamil land. Like they didn't go outside Tamil land, right? So whatever we're talking about Alvars and Nayanars and their actions, it was only happening within the state of the Tamil land, right? So while they were traveling, they identified all these small shrines, and they have declared them as the abodes of their chosen deities. Abodes are nothing but houses or homes, right? So, for example, if a Nayanar, a particular Nayanar, was traveling and then he came across a Shiva, or like a stone like sculpture which represents the Linga, right? He would declare and conclude that that particular area which is surrounding that Linga belongs to Shiva, or like is a Shiva dominated region. You know, like it's a shrine for Shiva, right? Like shrine is kind of a temple. So he would declare that that particular place is the shrine for Shiva, right? So just like these, we have so many temples. Like even in the 21st century, you go to any state, right, any part of the country, you will find Shiva and Vishnu temples literally everywhere, right? So from this Tamil land, later this tradition was picked up by other followers of Vishnu and Shiva as well, right? First it started in Tamil Nadu, and gradually it spread to other regions as well. And that is why, so basically these shrines or abodes of their chosen deities, as the centuries passed by, as powerful kings came up, they started building large temples around them, right? Like with like decorative architecture, with nice sculptures, wall paintings and all that stuff. They constructed large temples, and that is why these are all called as the centers of pilgrimage, right? For example, in the present day land of Tamil Nadu, you go to Tanjore, you go to Madurai, you go to Kanchi, you go to any place mentioned in the today's Tamil Nadu, you will definitely come across Shiva and Vishnu temples. That was how rapidly they spread the culture of Alvars and Nayanars, right? Yeah. Yes, Ayush, abode is the home of God. You're right. Okay. Okay, this is some kind of broad mark. Apparently, Ayush says that Alvars have a alphabet V, so that represents Vishnu or Vaishnavism. Again, guys, these are just like some random tricks. If you want to follow them, you can. Otherwise, if you want to follow some other method, you can, right? But like the important point here is you have to remember that Alvars means followers of Vishnu and Nayanars means followers of Shiva, right? Yeah. Cool. So where were we? Yeah, so large temples were built and they became centers of pilgrimage, right? The last point of the slide is singing compositions of these poet saints became part of the temple rituals in these shrines. The fact that these poet saints discovered these shrines or gave that particular place a significance, an importance, in order to honor that, whenever rituals were happening in those temples or shrines, uh, compositions or hymns were sung in praise of poet saints as well. Not just the god, like not just Vishnu and Shiva, but also compositions were sung in praise of poet saints just for the fact that they discovered that place. Got it? And also in some places they have so much significance that their idols or their sculptures were set up in the temples beside the sculptures of Shiva and Vishnu, and in fact they were worshipped. They were given a equivalent treatment to a god, right? Yeah. So that is the slide. Okay, so Devika has a question. How many sessions you'll take to cover this chapter? Uh, Devika, honestly, I can't give you an accurate number, but like to be very honest, this chapter is kind of larger than the other chapters we have dealt with till now. And also the fact that it's very abstract, so it'll take a lot of time to explain. So probably 4 sessions. 4 sessions. Yeah. I hope that answers your question, Devika. Okay. So from the Alvars and Nayanars, we'll still be talking about Alvars and Nayanars, but we'll move on to what their attitude was towards the caste system, right? Did they support the caste system? Did they oppose it? Did they protest against it? And stuff like that we'll deal in this particular slide. Okay, so actually if you look at the data or compositions of the text that Alvars and Nayanars have written, it is clearly evident that these particular sects of people, they were against the caste system. In fact, they protested against the caste system, right? And also the dominance of Brahmanas. Caste system is basically the dominance of Brahmanas, guys. Like, to be very honest, I sometimes think these words are synonymous, right? Caste system was in place because Brahmanas wanted it to be, because they wanted to exert their dominance, right? So basically Alvars and Nayanars were against this caste system. Even though they might be successful, they might not be successful in doing so, we don't really know, but at least they attempted to reform the system, right? They put in that effort and they kind of protested against the system. The effort counts. They attempted to do it, right? So how do we know that they were against the caste system? That's the question, right? So again, one explanation can be given to it because of the fact that people, whoever are the Alvars and Nayanars, they came from different social backgrounds and different castes, to be very honest. Some of them were Brahmanas themselves, some of them were artisans, cultivators, and surprisingly, few of the Alvars and Nayanars, they also belong to the untouchable caste, like outcast, right? They're not even a part of the Varna structure, right? We've talked about what the Varna structure is, like the fourfold Varna structure in chapter 2, in chapter 3, right? So untouchables didn't even come under the Varna structure. They were outside the caste system. Even they became Alvars and Nayanars, right? So when you analyze this point, it kind of becomes clear that they were against the caste system, right? They did not give a damn about the caste system. That is what you can infer from the composition of Alvars and Nayanars. Also, just to give you a little bit of side information, Alvars were basically 12 in number, right? If you all want, take this down somewhere. It's not a part of your textbook, but to make your understanding easier, it's important to remember that Alvars were 12 people and Nayanars were 63, right? In some textbooks, you will find there are only 10 Alvars, but that is somewhere wrong because we have proof that there are 12 Alvars and 63 Nayanars, right? Okay, that's just like a side information. Yeah, so dealing with the third point, the importance of these traditions like Alvars and Nayanars, Vaishnavism and Shaivism was sometimes indicated by the claim that their compositions were as important as the Vedas. As I was telling you, whatever compositions or hymns these people were singing, they are not a part of the Vedas. They are not extracted from any other external source, but they themselves wrote it, right? Like they themselves composed it. So In fact, they gave so much importance, right, to their compositions. And how did they do that? They often compared themselves to Vedas. Comparison in the terms of saying that there's a certain significance of Vedas, and the same significance is given to the compositions made by Alvars and Nayanars, right? By claiming that their compositions were as important as the Vedas, they have tried to attribute that significance to their compositions. And sorry, the lastly, if you look at one major anthology is nothing but a collection, right? So if you look at an anthology by Alvars, so called as Nalayara Divya Prabandham. Again, Nalayara Divya Prabandham is a anthology composed by Alvars. So I've told you there are 12 Alvars, right? 12 Alvars wrote different hymns, right? So all these different hymns were gathered together and compiled into an anthology called Nalayara Divya Prabandham, and it was called as a Tamil Veda. They are comparing themselves to Veda. That is how they are signifying that they are as important as Vedas, right? Yeah, like the same point again. It tries to explain the same, right? Like how there are 4 Vedas in Sanskrit: Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and Atharvana Veda. In the same manner, in the Tamil land, there is one Veda called as Nalayara Divya Prabandham, right? So this was often claimed by Alvars and Nayanars themselves in order to attribute some importance to them, right? Yeah. Yes, Ayush, that's what I exactly said. Nalayara Divya Prabandham was written by 12 Alvars. That was exactly the point I made, right? They wrote separate texts, but after writing them separately, they have combined it together, right? And that is how the anthology came up. You got the point? Okay, so Shrestha says it's clear. I'm hoping other people are following too, right? Yes, you're right, Ayush. I know it's a surprising fact because how a group of 12 people can make such a great impact, right? If that is the question you're thinking, even I was surprised at first, but like it's the truth. There were only 12 Alvars and 12 significant poet saints, right? Like they had so many followers. But these 12 Alvars were the poet saints who were treated equally to God. That is what I mean by 12 Alvars. They had their own followers, right? Yes, yes, Ayush, yes. Yeah, and when it comes to Niners, they are 63. Okay, we will move on. Okay, just to give you some excerpt from their compositions itself that they are against the caste system. Let's just look at this source box, which is source box number 2 in your textbook, titled as Shastras or Devotion, right? So the source box says that whatever these 3 lines are, right, from O Rogues to Marperu's Lord, this is a verse composed by Appar. Appar was a Nayanar saint, one among the 63 saints, right? So Appar composed it in his composition and says that, O rogues, who quotes the law books? So basically he's calling Brahmanas as rogues. That was like an extreme step, right? Nobody would dare to call that back in those times, but Appar did. So he called Brahmanas as rogues. He was like, "Oh rogues, who quote the law books? Who is it that they have written all these Dharma Shastras, Dharma Sutras? They are the law books, right? Like, who wrote them? What is the legitimacy that you're giving to them? Right? Are they divine creations? No, right? You yourself wrote them. So where's the legitimacy given to them, right? So he's questioning them. Of what use are your Gotra and Kula? you keep cribbing about the fact that there are gotras, there are kulas, there are certain provisions to be followed if you're a part of the gotras and kulas. Don't do this, do that, don't marry within the gotra, and all these kinds of rules and regulations, right? What use they are of, right? Again, upper is questioning. What is the use of that? Instead of doing all that, instead of wasting your time on all that, he says that just bow to Marperu's lord. You know, irrespective of all those differences, irrespective of caste, irrespective of gotra, kula, just come and bow your head and, you know, like praise Marperu's lord. Again, Marperu is a town in Tamil Nadu. It is near to Tanjore, right? It is a Shiva temple, and since the region name is Marperu, he's referring to that lord as Marperu's lord, right? Like lord of that town, lord of Marperu. So basically, he's it's a Shiva temple. So bow down in front of him and accept that he's your god, and take refuge there. Like that's the sole refuge you have, right? So this is what Upper was saying as a part of his compositions, and clearly it states to us that they are clearly against the Brahmanical order, they are against the caste system, right? Okay. Oh, okay. So rogues is like a negative bad word. Like, how do I put it? Rogues is like evil people or who does bad activities. That's not the exact meaning, but I think I'm somewhere close to it, right? Yeah, like idiot or all these terms are like the simplistic forms of rogue, right? Rogue is like an extreme negative attribution. Okay, so any questions till here, guys? Almost like whatever topics we are dealing with today, they are kind of important because they lay down the basic concepts, right? Like we are coming across so many new terms today. Alvars, Nayanars, Divya Prabandham, like there's so many concepts and terms. These are important. So like today's class as a whole gives you a segment or like a segue into the further sub themes of the chapter, right? So yes, so no questions, says Ayush. Then we can move on. Okay, so the next sub theme in your textbook is women devotees, right? Usually we would imagine that since it was a patriarchal system, a society dominated by men, we would assume or have a misconception that women basically did not become a part of the Alvars and Nayanars. That is what we would assume. But that is not the case, right? Even in the limited set of 12 Alvars, they were women present there. Like there was only one woman, which was Andal, like her name was Andal, but nonetheless there was at least one woman, right? So women did play an actual role in these traditions, especially Nayanars and Alvars, right? So we look at what their contribution is and what their form of devotion is, right? The fact that women existed, or the fact that the mere presence of women was one of the striking features of these traditions. And this kind of sets them apart from the Brahmanical order, right? Like if you look at the Brahmanical order, no women was allowed to even come closer to the religious field or like a temple or some kind of rituals. They're not even allowed to come closer. But when it comes to Alvars and Nayanars, like people actually became one of those prominent figures. That was importance given to the women as a part of the tradition, right? So yeah, we look at compositions of Andal, right? As I was telling you, Andal was the only woman Alvar out of the 12 Alvars, and her compositions were widely sung. Like she wrote an n number of compositions, n number of verses, and they were widely sung. Like even now, if you visit a Vishnu temple, you can like even now people are practicing all those compositions slash verses which are written by Andal, right? So she often expressed herself as the beloved of Vishnu, right? So as soon as you remember this, as soon as you hear this, one thing must strike your mind, right? Which is Mirabai. Mirabai also considered her deity, which is Krishna, as the beloved, as her beloved, right? So again, this is just like a what do you say, comparison I'm giving, so that you'll understand the relationship between Vishnu and Andal, right? Andal considered herself as beloved of Vishnu, and whatever verses she wrote them out of love for the deity. Like she expresses her love very clearly for the deity, for Vishnu, right? And if you move on to Shaivism, Nayanars, there's another prominent women figure called Karaikal Ammayar. Again, proper nouns, guys. Pronunciation might be a little itchy, but you get the spelling basically. It's Karaikal Ammayar, right? She was a devotee of Shiva, and she adopted the path of extreme asceticism, right? Her ultimate goal was to attain moksha and salvation, right? And in order to do that, she resorted to extreme asceticism, and her compositions were preserved within the Nayanar tradition, right? Whatever compositions they dedicated, they compiled, all of them are very much preserved as a part of the Nayanar traditions, right? Okay. Okay, good question, Ayush. Alvas and Nayanars are Saguna or Nirguna. Right. So when we were talking about Saguna, we've clearly looked at aspects like all these followers of Vishnu, Shiva, Devi, all of them are Saguna devotees, right? Because they are putting up a physical figure of Vishnu or a physical figure of Shiva in front of them and worshipping them. So obviously they are Saguna devotees. That's a good question, by the way. It's good that you're drawing analogies between one section of the chapter to the other, right? Yes. Yeah, so they're Saguna devotees, Ayush. Um, Anyways, so we were here, right? Like these women renounced their social obligations but did not join an alternative order or become nuns. Again, when you look at other form of Brahmanical saints, the least you would expect of them, not just Brahmanical but even Jaina monks, right? Like we saw how observing celibacy was one of the important rule which is to be followed by a Jaina monk or a nun. Like celibacy is not marrying, right? So all these conditions were not a part of Alvar and Nayanar traditions. It's just that you have to associate yourself to God, right? Compose all these hymns, praise him by singing those hymns, like worship him in different forms, but you don't necessarily have to like give up all your life, like give up your social life and all that stuff. So you are expected to do is the bare minimum, just worship. That is the bare minimum. But if you want to resort to extreme asceticism, you can, but that is not a mandatory thing, right? They did not become nuns or like they did not join the alternative order. They just remained who they are, like they cut down on their social life, and that time they dedicated to worshipping their particular deities, right? Yeah, so we're talking about women in a patriarchal setting. That in itself is a huge thing, right? Because usually women don't have a voice in a patriarchal setting, especially in the 6th century CE. But the fact that there were women devotees and they were important, and they don't really have to do anything, like they don't have to go onto the streets, protest saying down patriarchal society. No, you don't have to do all of that stuff. The mere presence of them, like their mere existence, and also their compositions, like whatever sacred hymns they are writing, these two in themselves pose a challenge to the patriarchal norms, right? So what are we seeing here? These are these have a very symbolic significance, right? The mere existence of the women herself, like the mere existence of Andal or the existence of Karaikal Amayar, their normal existence in itself is a threat to the patriarchal society, right? Okay. Any questions till here? Yes, Ayush, you're right. Extreme asceticism means self-discipline and bodily mortifications, and sometimes bodily mortifications can go to any random extremes, that even it includes self-torture, right? That's like a worst thing any human can do to himself or herself. Why would you want to put yourself through something which is torture, right? Like, I don't know, like you come across all these. Again, it's not so much prevalent in the 21st century, but still you come across all these movie clips or some kind of animated videos, with like some kind of people, they insert that, what do you call that, some stick like thingy into their tongue, or like they pierce their ears, or they walk on the fire coals and all that stuff. Like, that's literally putting yourself through self torture, right? So even bodily mortifications can go to that kind of extremes. So what I'm saying is, these kind of bodily mortifications are not a part of Niners and Alvar traditions, right? Yeah, thank you, Ayush, for bringing that point. Okay, yeah, we will move on. Buddha followed what, Ayush? You're telling that Buddha followed bodily modifications? Okay, so just answer that. In the meanwhile, we'll deal with the next sub theme. This is not a sub theme actually, there is a box in your textbook, not a source box, but a normal box, which is titled as Compilations of Devotional Literature, right? How did Nalayara Devi Prabandham came into existence, or how did Tevaram came into existence? So these two texts are compositions or anthologies of their respective poet saints. So first we look into Nalayara Divya Prabandham. So Nalayara, in the Tamil language, in some kind of sense means that 4,000, right? Nala, or like null or something, it's 4, and ira or ira basically means 1,000. So Nalayara is basically 4,000. So by almost 10th century, right, this work has been happening right from the 6th century. So as the time passed by, so many compositions were made, and they accounted to 4,000 finally, right? So by the 10th century, all these 4,000 compositions, they were gathered together, like they were compiled together, and they were made into an anthology called as Nalayara Divya Prabandham, right? These included the works of all 12 alvars. So this is like the sole, one and only sacred composition, Nalayara Divya Prabandham, when it comes to alvars, or when it comes to followers of Vishnu, right? But when you look at the other scenario, when talking about Nayanars, right? As I've told you, there are 63 saints, right? So out of 63, there are three important names called as Appar. The names are here, guys. Appar, Sambandar, and Sundarar, right? So these three are the three famous Nayanar saints. Whatever compositions they made, they were compiled into an anthology called Tevaram, right? The spelling is here, Tevaram. And Nayanars, like the Alvars, did not just have one sacred composition, right? Because there are 63 saints, obviously they would have a lot more compositions, right? They couldn't fit all of that into one anthology, so they have like a different set of anthologies, right? And Tevaram is one of them, and it includes the compositions of Appar, Sambandar, and Sundarar, right? So again, this kind of classification was solely made on the basis of the music of the songs, right? Like if they have a particular pattern, if they have a particular music or some kind of musical note attached to them, if they are similar, they would be clubbed under one particular category, right? Okay, cool. Okay, so we'll move on to the next sub-theme, which is relations with the state, right? So to be very honest, when these traditions started out, like Alvars and Niners, they started out in 6th century BC, CE itself, right? When they started out, we do not see powerful kingdoms emerging in the Tamil land, but after a century or so, there were powerful kingdoms coming up, right? To be very specific, this was happening around the second half of the first millennium. Second half of the first millennium, this tradition was coming up, and there are evidence for very, very powerful state, especially those of Pallavas and Pandyas, right? Pallavas and Pandyas were ruling over the present day Tamil Nadu and Kerala from the 6th century to 9th century CE. They swayed their influence almost for 3 straight centuries, right? That's a lot. That basically means that the dynasty was very, very powerful, right? So before that, we have seen how kingdoms were not there, but chiefdoms were there in Tamil land, right? We've discussed that in chapter 2, and we've also seen what the differences are between chiefdoms and kingdoms. So once we entered into the second half of the first millennium, we've seen the emergence of powerful kingdoms, namely Pallavas and Pandyas, right? So another point to remember here is, in the Tamil land, before Alvars and Niners came up, Alvars and Niners came up only from 6th century CE, right? So till 6th century CE, people of the Tamil land were following Buddhism and Jainism to a great extent. Like Buddhism and Jainism almost infiltrated into the deep rootings of the society. Like in every household, in every society, somebody or the other followed Buddhism and Jainism. And not just that, they often received occasional royal patronage. Okay, so royal patronage is something which we need to pay attention about, because like back in those days, religion and the state had a very close affiliation, in the sense that in order for the religion to be successful, or in order for the religious saints to be successful, they depended on the state for help. And it's not just a one-way thing. In fact, it's a two-way street, because even the royal kings or the kshatriyas depended on these saints for their growth. So it's like a mutual interdependence, right? So these royal people, they were providing patronage for Buddhism and Jainism already, when slowly these new traditions were coming up. New traditions are Alvars and Niners, right? So what kinds of patronage patronage was this? So patronage can be in various forms. For example, you can fund to the religious institutions, or you can fund for the construction of various temples or chaityas or other kinds of religious institutions, right? So supporting them, either in terms of monetary benefits, like giving them money and resources, or just by some other means, right? There are n number of means through which you can carry out a patronage. So this can be in the form of anything, and royal patronage or kings actually did that when it comes to Buddhism and Jainism till the 6th century CE, right? So when Alvars and Niners came up, since they were very, very new, they couldn't gain that support from the kings themselves, right? Because kings would only provide money if they themselves believe in that tradition, right? Like let's say, for example, a king is a Buddha, like Buddhist, and some other Nayanar or an Alvar will go to the king and ask for funds. Why will he give? Because he doesn't believe in Vishnu or Shiva. He believes in Buddha. So if a Buddhist comes and asks for royal patronage, then he will give it to a Buddhist monk, right? So you're getting the point here. A king will only support somebody who is of his own community or his own religion, right? So when these new traditions were coming up, their one of the major content of their hymns was opposition to Buddhism and Jainism, right? Because obviously they are jealous, right? Like it's very clear that Alvars and Nayanars were jealous of Buddhists and Jainists because they are receiving patronage from royal kings, but they are, Alvars and Nayanars are not. So obviously that's a point of conflict. That's a point where they have to be jealous. Like they need to be jealous. Yeah, so that they showed that jealousy in the form of writings, and one of the major content of their compositions was the opposition to Buddhism and Jainism, right? Okay. Yes. Thank you, Ayush, for tying the patronage point back to first and second chapters. We've already talked about patrons and bards, right? Like royal patronage can be either to religious institutions or to merchants or artisans, anybody. We've talked about trader groups and their patronage from the royal families in chapter 1 and 2. Now we are talking about that same royal patronage for the religious institutions, right? Yes, kings funding poets who are also called as bards to write in praise of them. You're absolutely right. Thank you. Thank you for bringing up that point, Ayush. Cool. So, yeah. So, we were talking about that opposition in the content of their compositions, right? So, if you look at the Nayanar compositions, right, it can be very particularly seen. Like, it's just out there, right? At least in Alvar traditions, they try to somehow indirectly convey the message. But when it comes to Nayanars, the message was just out right there. They are clearly showing it on the face that they are against Buddhist and Jainist people, right? Okay, so again, historians have tried to understand this hostile behavior. Like, why is there such a negativity or why is there such opposition? And they came to a conclusion that it is solely based on the royal patronage, right? I was telling you the same point that the fact that they are not receiving royal patronage, they are bound to be jealous, right? They are bound to be hostile to the other religious traditions, right? So we'll move on from that to the third point on the slide here is that we'll come back to Chola rulers now. So till 6th to 9th, Pandyas and Cheras were prominent, right? Pandyas and Pallavas. But when it comes to 9th century, the dynamic changes, right? Cholas become more powerful and they almost ruled for 4 centuries straight till the 13th century CE, right? So these Chola rulers, they supported Brahmanical and Bhakti traditions. Some of them supported Brahmanical religion, some of them supported Nayanas, some supported Alvars, like there were a range of supporters, right? So in order to show their support, they made royal patronages in the form of land grants, number one. Number two is constructing temples, right? The first one is land grants, the second one is constructing temples. So these powerful Chola kings, they performed this kind of royal patronage and built temples for Vishnu and Shiva, right? So in fact, if you look at the major magnificent Shiva temples in the present day Tamil Nadu, like they're still alive. They are tourist attractions, pilgrim attractions. Even now you can go and visit them, right? So these are some temples in the places of Chidambaram, Tanjore and Gangaikonda Cholapuram. Back in those days, Gangaikonda Cholapuram was one of the very, very important regions of the Chola rulers, right? At one point of time, I think it was even their capital, right? So Tanjore, Gangaikonda Cholapuram and Chidambaram were three major places where you find all these magnificent Shiva temples, all built under the patronage of Chola rulers. So basically Chola rulers were great patrons. That is the point, right? Yes. Okay. And this, okay, so moving on, and this is exactly the time, the same period where most spectacular representations of Shiva in bronze sculpture were coming up. Till then, whatever sculptures were being made of Shiva or Vishnu or Devi or any other god, or any other god which has a physical form, these sculptures were basically made of stone. But this was the time when Cholas were at the peak of their power. They introduced something called bronze sculptures, and images of Shiva or spectacular representations of Shiva were being done through the bronze sculptures, right? It was happening at this particular point of time. And clearly the visions of the Nayanars inspired artists, right? These Nayanars had a certain figure or like a certain imagination in their head, right? Like, okay, Shiva looks so and so, like he is in the form of this or he's in the form of that. They used to represent, and artists used to carve those sculptures exactly according to how the Nayanars described them, right? And next interesting point is both Alvars and Nayanars were revered by the Vellala peasants. Again, Vellala peasants are these rich peasants, right? Like ultra rich. Even now, if you go to Tamil Nadu and ask who the Vellala caste people are, Vellala peasants are, everybody would say that they are the dominating people, right? They are the rich people and all that sort of stuff. They respected Alvars and Nayanars, right? Revered is nothing but showing their respect, right? And not just Vellala peasants, but the king himself, right? He tried to win the support of Alvars and Nayanars. Okay, Vellala peasants are common people. They respecting Alvars and Nayanars and asking for their support, it's like a common thing. Fine, both two commoners asking help from each other. But the fact that rulers were also, you know, engaging to win the support of Alvars and Nayanars shows that there's a lot of importance or due credit given to Alvars and Nayanars, right? So the importance is being signified here. And for instance, we look at one such example where the ruler tried to sway away the Alvars and Nayanars, right? The Chola kings, like the Chola kings as a whole, they attempted to claim divine support, right? And proclaim their own powers and status by building splendid temples, right? By obviously, how will they show their support? The only way they can show their support is by, you know, like sharing their wealth or distributing their wealth or constructing these huge temples with decorative sculptures and all that stuff, right? And adorning them with stone and metal sculptures to recreate the visions of these popular saints. I was telling you, right? They had a particular vision in their head. Alvars and Nayanars, they thought that, okay, fine, the sculpture of Shiva or the sculpture of Vishnu should be so and so, should be exactly in this form. And for the sculpture to happen, they needed money. So kings used to give this money. Kings used to fund these sculptures and temples, right? So in that way, obviously, when a king is doing so much, obviously Alvars and Nayanars would be in support of the kings, right? Would be in support of the royal families. So that was exactly what was happening between the Cholas and the new traditions that were coming up, right? Why kings were not funding Alvars and Nayanars? Ayush, if your question is why funding is not happening to the people themselves, like Alvars and Nayanars, but to the temples, the answer simply is Alvars and Nayanars were leading a very simplistic way of life, right? Just like how saints live, they do not indulge in worldly pleasures, or like they don't need all that wealth and stuff. Their only sole purpose is to devote themselves to God, right? So even if king wants to give resources or gold or cash or wealth, whatever, to Alvars and Nayanars, they would obviously refuse it. They wouldn't take it because they wouldn't need it. They gave up on all those worldly pleasures, right? So that is why funding was not done to the Alvars and Niners, but to the temples, right? Because temples in some way represented Alvars and Niners. Okay, I hope. I said that they were angry on kings. Who were angry on kings, Ayush? I've never said that they were angry on kings. I said that, okay, the point I made about angry is that angry, jealous, if that is the point you're referring to, I told that Alvars and Niners were angry on Buddhists and Jainists and Jains, not on the kings. Kings and the traditions always had a very cordial relationship, very friendly relationship. Okay. Just go back to the topic later, right? And just look at the slides. That will kind of make your understanding easier, right? Okay. Not a problem. We will move on. Cool. So these kings also introduced the singing of Tamil Shaiva hymns in temples under royal patronage. As in, within the temples themselves, already hymns were being sang, right, by the priests or as a part of ritual culture. But this time, they are being sung under the name of royal patronage, right? Again, to give you an analogy as to what happens today, if all of you all are going to a temple, right, like if anybody goes to a temple, attending a normal puja session is one thing, but going to the priest of the temple and asking him to perform a puja on your name or on your own family's name, right, telling your gotra, telling your family status, telling your family members names and all that stuff is a different thing, right? So the second one is a more what do you say, it's a more private thing. So even the royal people, they were making sure that the hymns were sung in the temples under their patronage, right? Yeah. And in fact, these kings were the people who took the initiative to collect and organize them into text, right? So all these hymns, as I was telling you, they were very like composed by different people, just spread apart, like in different places. So kings took up this responsibility, right? They made sure that these hymns are brought together and compiled into one or more anthologies, right? Exactly in the same manner, Tevaram also came up. I was telling you, Tevaram was this Shiva anthology, right? Produced by the Nayanars. Those three Niners we talked about, right? Sundarar and yeah, those two other names. So their anthologies were brought together, their compilations were brought together as a Tevaram anthology, and the work that the kings put in to bring them together is the important point here. It is because of kings that the compilation happened. Otherwise, till today, they would just remain as separate parts, right? Yeah. So further, if you imagine inscriptional evidence from around 945 CE, right? If you look at one of the inscriptions, it suggests that the Chola ruler Parantaka I, right? Parantaka I was again a very, very important king belonging to the Chola dynasty, which ruled from 9 to 13 centuries, right? So at around 945, who was basically like a early Chola king, right? So he had consecrated metal images of Appar, Sambandar and Sundarar in a Shiva temple. So the point here is, firstly, he ordered that the sculptures of Appar, Sambandar and Sundarar were sculpted, right? These were niner saints, which basically tells us that Parantaka I was a Shiva follower, right? So he ordered the sculptures of these three people. He installed them at a particular place in one particular Shiva temple, and also he consecrated metal images. What is consecration? It basically means that giving those sculptures a sacred status, right? Giving them a divine status. So that is consecration, right? So again, king is putting in efforts towards the progressiveness of be it alvars or niners, right? And there were also certain festivals dedicated just to these poet saints, just to these 12 alvars and 63 niners. There were certain festivals dedicated to them, and these sculptures, they were carried in processions during the festivals, right? Like even now, like if you look at I don't know, some random Hindu festivals. At the end of the day, like when the festival is almost coming to an end, by the night there are processions happening on the road, right? Like they carry those sculptures or statues of God, and they roam around the entire area, right? And put them back in the temple, or in case of Ganesh Chaturthi, they drip it in the water sources. So just like that, when these processions were happening during the festivals, they used to take these statues out onto the streets, right? Cool. Okay, so that brings us to the end of today's discussion. But before ending the actual class, I would just like you all to think about one question, right? Why do you think kings were interested in proclaiming their connections with bhaktas? Kings in themselves are very powerful, right? They have all this legitimacy. People obey kings. People have a lot of respect for kings. Like, even though they are on such a high pedestal, even though they are given a lot of importance, they have so much significance in the society. But why are they at the back of the bhaktas to make connections? Bhaktas are basically niners or alvars in this case, right? Why are kings so much interested in proclaiming their connections with bhaktas? This is a question we need to constantly think about, right? Different scholars have given different explanations to this. And one of the very famous explanation, I think I've also like kind of touched upon it when we were dealing with chapter 2, but I will make the point very clear here in this slide. Again, this is just one explanation, guys. There are another explanations also given by a different set of scholars, and if you find that some other explanation is possible, you can come up with that. It's totally a free choice, because these kinds of things do not have a definite answer. We can just speculate certain things, right? So as far as Tamil Bhakti hymns were written by both. Yes, Ayush. Alvars and Niners both wrote Tamil Bhakti hymns. Okay, no deviation. Okay, I was telling you about one speculation, right? So I was telling you how not all kings or not all rulers belong to the Kshatriya caste, right? Some were from Shudra caste, some were Vaishyas, Brahmins, whatever it is. They did not have a particular caste assigned to them. Even though the Dharma Shastras and Dharma Shastras state that they have to belong to the Kshatriya category, Kshatriya caste, that was not the case every time. They were from different categories as well, right? So if you think from that perspective, in order to be accepted fully, right, in the society, like amidst the people, for people to accept them, for brahmanas to accept them, and to have that upper hand and legitimacy in the society, it is important for them to attribute to some form of religion. When they don't have that caste support, right, it is important for them to attribute to some form of a religion. At least then the followers of that particular religion would eventually become followers of the king, right? You're getting the point. It's not a direct relation. The fact that king is supporting some religion, let's say Vishnu, right? So an ex-king is supporting Vishnu, supporting as in he's a devotee of Vishnu, and he's making all these land grants, he's making all this royal patronage for the Vishnu temples, right? So people whoever are followers of Vishnu, they will have a soft corner for this king, right? They'll be like, okay, fine, so this king is also a part of our community. Like they'll get that sense of belonging, right? So because of that, if religion is one such thing which would reach out to a lot of masses, Like every individual believes in some or the other tradition, irrespective of what that is. I might believe in Shaivism, I might believe in Buddhism, I might believe in Vaishnavism. Irrespective of that, I believe in something. The belief is important, right? So so basically religion is something which reaches out to the masses, and the fact that king is making an association with the religion means that, indirectly means that, he is making an association with the masses as well. So that is the connection he's trying to make. So the ultimate point is to gain legitimacy within the society, right? Yes, that's a very good sum up, Ayush. Uh, just look at Ayush's comment, guys. He says, because kings want power, status, and support from laymen. That is exactly what legitimacy means, right? Thanks, Ayush, for the point. Okay, then I'll see you on Wednesday, Ayush. Cool. So, anyways, we are also towards the end of it. So, I'm hoping the one speculation that surrounds within the Academy of History is this: to gain legitimacy, right? Yeah, so that brings us to the end of discussion for today. Any questions, guys, please put them down in the chat box. I will answer them. In the meanwhile, you type your questions. I will just try to wind this session up, right? So we were talking about iconic and plus subscriptions in the beginning of the class. So just wanted to tell you that using my code will give you a 10% off straight away. And not just that, there's a special offer going on from 18 September, which ends by the end of this week. And you can get an extra 5% off on a 9-month subscription and an extra 10% off on any subscription which goes above 12 months, right? So that's like a 10 plus 5 and 10 plus 10 offer. So quickly go grab yours, whichever one you want to, right? So this offer is only for a week and it started a couple of on 18th of September, right? Okay. Anyway, so if you like the content of this videos, please do like them as soon as the live stream ends. Also, go share it as much as possible, and also subscribe to the channel Unacademy and also scholars in particular, right? Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And yeah, I will see you guys again on Wednesday at 6 p.m. right? We'll be continuing this chapter, right? It's going to be a part 3 video of chapter 6, Bhakti Sufi traditions. I'll see you on Wednesday. Till then, have a good evening, have a good day tomorrow, right? I'll see you on Wednesday, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, thank you, Ayush. That actually means a lot. I'm glad you're following the classes. Thank you so much. Okay, cool. So that brings us to the end of class. I'll just hang around for a couple of seconds to answer any questions y'all might have. But if not, y'all are free to leave, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in again. Okay. Cool. So I think that's the end. Okay, just a reminder, next class is on Wednesday at 6 p.m. We'll talk about the continuation of chapter 6 and I'll see you around. Thank you so much.